The Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 13th chapter. Now Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When Jesus laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites! Does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox and his donkey from the manger and lead it to water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, who Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from the bondage on the Sabbath day?" When he said this, all of his opponents were put to shame. And the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things being done by him. The gospel of the Lord. You may be seated. Grace, mercy, and peace to you from the triune God, creator, liberator, and sustainer of all life. Amen. Good morning, beloved church. Lately, I wake up and I am excited to see you. Like there is a pulse going through me that I don't know, I'm feeling like spiritually sassy these days. And I'll get into that more later. But there is a pulse, and I am tapping into it, and God is moving in deep ways, and as a community, I want us to get welled up in it, and for us not to fall into despair, but into deep, deep power. Our bodies are storytellers. Our muscles, our tendons, our blood cells, our nerve endings, even our gut biome carry on a cellular level the generational manuscripts of history, law, and social expectation. Every day, you and I witness stories about bodies, like people, like actual people, children, aunties, parents, favorite cousins, and they all have a name, and they are main characters in their own stories. But when we look at the larger world, some bodies are celebrated and protected and granted freedom, and others are surveilled and constrained and punished and terrorized and excluded and killed simply for existing in a different way than those who hoard and hold power. For the last couple years, I have been diving into research about trauma and how it impacts every system in our body. One of the first books I read was by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and maybe many of you have read this book as well. It's groundbreaking. The book was called The Body Keeps Score, and he writes this: "Traumatized people chronically feel unsafe inside their bodies. The past is alive in the form of a gnawing interior discomfort. Their bodies are constantly bombarded by a visceral warning sign. Our nervous systems not only store personal trauma, but intergenerational experiences of oppression, of violence, of marginalization. And I have learned that what appears like to be an individual person's suffering often reflects a collective wound that has been passed down through families and communities." Van der Kolk argues that trauma literally rewrites our biology, altering brain structure, disrupting stress hormones, embedding memories in muscle and bone. I think of all the teachers who encounter little bodies, and little bodies already communicate stories to teachers. And teachers who've been teaching for a long time know. The child who shows up and they haven't had breakfast. The child who's afraid anytime that someone raises their voice in the classroom. Teachers on the front line sometimes of our most innocent ones who know suffering. They can see the signs of trauma. He writes, "After trauma, the world becomes sharply divided between those who know and those who don't. Some bodies tell the story of safety and privilege, and other hold memories of danger and exclusion and live most of the time in a state of flight or fight or freeze or fawn. Today we meet a woman whose body tells us a story of suffering. For 18 long years, she has been bent over, unable to stand or lift her eyes to look someone in the face. Yet Jesus sees her. I love this. And with a tender touch of grace, reveals the very heart of God, who longs for all people to experience holistic freedom, actual transformation, and the healing in body, mind, and spirit. Now, the text doesn't tell us what was this mysterious spirit that plagued this woman for 18 years. But what story is her body telling us? Did she have to work so long, maybe out in the heat, laboring in the field for so long that her back gave out? Or maybe she suffered an extraordinary loss and she suffered from heartbreak, and she leaned over to cradle her throbbing chest. Or maybe she had an abusive spouse or parent that fed her a steady diet of threats and harm, and it atrophied her spirit, and she believed every lie. Or maybe she was just weighed down by crushing debt and the worry of that. Or maybe she had an accident. Or maybe religious leaders or doctors blamed her for having a spine that was locked in place. We don't know, but for 18 years, this woman could not stand up and throw her head back and even just gaze at the stars. We're going to try an experiment, my friends. I want you to embody and get in tune with this woman. So as you are comfortable, you are invited to stand. If you would rather remain seated, you are welcome to. If you have back problems, stay right where you are and close your eyes. So that is just, I don't want anyone walking out with a back problem after having the sermon. But for those who feel comfortable, I invite you to stand. You are going to lean over. If you remain seated, stay in your seat, but you can lean over so that you can see your toes. So you have to lean over so you can see your toes. And just stay there. And if you're closing your eyes, I invite you to just close your eyes and imagine what this is like. What do you see? What do you not see? Have you noticed if your breath has changed? Is it easy or hard to breathe? What about your balance? Think about staying in this position for another 15 minutes, or an hour, or the rest of the day, or for 18 years. What does this posture do to someone's spirit, to their self-esteem, to their hopes, to their dreams? I invite you to stay in this position a little bit longer and listen to your body interpret what it is telling you. Can you imagine people walking by you and not acknowledging you, or whispering about you and you cannot see them, but you know that they're there? Can you understand the isolation this dear woman might have felt? The parties she didn't attend, the different experiences she didn't go to. And then imagine Jesus calling you over, and you shuffle forward, but you still cannot raise your head. And Jesus says, you're set free. And you understand what he's really saying. He's saying you're free from everything in your past, everything that's kept you in bondage. You are free from what people say about you or think about you. You are free from stigma and exclusion and from being invisible. And then Jesus touches your back. Warmth surges through your spine up to the crown of your head. Your muscles and joints start to fully release, and you begin to stand straight for the first time in years. You're welcome to be seated. What did you notice? What? You noticed the floor. Yes, the floor, and that was about all. What else? What else did you notice? Your what? Your balance goes off. Darkness, so there was a complete lack of light, connection, the ability to see people. So much changes by just this posture. Can you now breathe a little bit easier? Think of how this healing transformed her life. I wonder if the woman's body, even though it might have been dismissed by some, was profitable to others. If her bent-over frame served someone else's economic interests. I have a faithful hunch that Jesus did not see her body as an individual problem, but as a sign of a systemic failure. How many times had people walked by her and maybe not offered help to heal her, to get her some water, to get her some food? How many times had people just pitied her and think, well, at least I'm not like her? I think of how oftentimes there are many within our community that we can walk by and we can easily dismiss, or come to the conclusion that someone would want to sleep outside, would not want to have a home, would not want to have a refrigerator with food, and we excuse and say, well, that's normal. That's what they always want, but not take into account how trauma has deeply impacted their entire life, probably from childhood or from even in their womb, in their mother's womb. When Jesus heals this woman, he heals her publicly, and he is boldly sharing that her body matters, that her story matters, and her suffering deserves attention, and her freedom is worth celebrating. And you would think the religious leader would be like, let's throw a party. Let's have a big old party, but instead the religious leader gets indignant, doesn't talk to Jesus, but start talking to everybody else. You can just see him. What is he doing? There's 6 other days that he could be doing healing, and why isn't he doing it on this day? You can just hear this like vindictive kind of undermining spirit that's just wanting to completely minimize the miraculous freedom, liberation that this woman is experiencing. This religious leader has completely missed the point of the Sabbath, which was the day to dwell and commune with God, but also to live in the freedom of those who were in exile in Egypt now finally could live in freedom. They didn't have to rest. They didn't have to work anymore as slaves in Egypt. They could rest. That is worth celebration. And the day is about liberation. And Jesus liberated her in the fullness that he liberated her. Whenever I read about this religious leader, I just want to say, what the bleep? Other words. He is just so indignant and self-righteous, and he is like forcibly angry that this woman is experiencing a fresh breath of wholeness and healing. And it makes me stop and think, why aren't we sometimes like throwing parties when more affordable housing is going up? We should be throwing more parties. We should be throwing parties when another food bank opens up and people can get food. We should be throwing. You think about if we get caught up in the joy and the celebration of liberation, it should like completely transform us, and there should be parties all the time when all people are receiving the resources and the care and the love and the recognition that every body deserves. Like underneath it all, the religious leader had bought into maintaining a patriarchal system where he and others determine who gets healed and when they get healed and under what conditions. And he wants to keep shaping the story of the woman's body. My friends, bodies are political and spiritual and holy. And I don't know about you, but I have this week alone noticed how there is so much rhetoric around bodies. The rewriting of history in the Smithsonian to dampen and minimize the history of slavery in the U.S. That is an act against bodies. Painting over the memorial for Pulse, that beautiful rainbow crosswalk in the middle of the night, and I love that folks went back with chalk and put it back in. But that is actually an assault on bodies, LGBTQIA bodies. And this week, we also had the passing of James Dobson. And I'm going to pause right here. In my 20-plus years of ministry, I have spent a lot of time listening to people who were deeply traumatized growing up in fundamentalist churches that were shaped by focus on the family. And this ideology was so deeply harmful for children, and I'm just going to lift up a few of the things that were lifted up, and I can't go into them all. And my heart has been broken for as many people as I've thought of over the years that I've walked with, but then also just within this last week, the stories that have come forth of people who've had to excommunicate themselves from their parents because their parents still feel that this is the way to love. James Dobson believed that children were sinful at birth, and in order to secure a bond between the parent and the children, you needed to use corporal punishment, a belt preferably. And children needed to cry in order to really know that they had done something wrong. So violence was connected to God and connected to love. He lifted up this fixed idea of gender binaries. Boys were to be strong and aggressive, and they needed natural ways to get that out, and girls needed to learn these traditional ways of being a homekeeper and to keep their sexuality only for their husband-to-be. It was a fear-based body control discipline that was rooted in fear and not in love. And I'm not going through all of it, but it has deeply harmed many people who have walked away from the church. And I understand. But James Dobson interpreted the gospel and interpreted the law in a way that was perverse and actually lifted up more of a white supremacy, capitalistic notion that reflected more himself than Jesus. Because Jesus, we know, cared about healing bodies. He noticed bodies. He didn't beat bodies into submission, but instead brought them forth to fully experience love and grace. And Jesus disrupts all of those forms of violence. Did you know later on in Luke 14, Jesus heals a man with dropsy? We don't ever get this story, but dropsy was associated in the first century with like a fluid retention. And it was believed that only the wealthy would get dropsy. Jesus heals this man of this disease. Jesus healed every body that he encountered because he saw each one of them as sacred, each one that was valuable, and he longed for each one to flourish. God's love is not this zero-sum game. God's grace is abundant and enough to lift up all who are bent low and suffering by crushed by life. You think about it, Jesus' love is revolutionary. Radical when it takes hold and shapes our practices. God's love changes the posture by which we encounter people. I found myself yesterday when I was at the grocery store because I was getting ready for you all, and then I'm like, okay, how is this changing me? So I was at Grocery Outlet, which is like one of my favorite places to be. And I decided I am going to embody God's love. I'm sure the people down like the frozen aisle were not excited as I was coming. Because I found myself going, how can I communicate to this dear person that they are worthy of love? Like, what can my body do just in a brief encounter to communicate love? So I looked people in the eyes. I asked them how their day is. I turned to someone and said, boy, it's hot. I hope you can cool off today. I found myself saying, how can I be this little teeny vessel of love, of goodness? How can I embody it? Like, there are things that we can do. I can't go and heal someone who has been crippled for 18 years. No. And I don't know the wounds and the sorrow that each person carries. I have trauma in my life. You have yours in your life. And we cannot tend to it all. We only have one, a healer who can do that, and we can do that collectively together. But revolutionary love is going to continue to stand in the wake of all of these forces that say that we need to divide, that there are right and there are left, that there is a way that we just have to demonize. And no, we are called to this love that stands above, that recognizes, that cares, that works toward deep healing and transformation in every system that is broken and in need of repair. And so we're coming up to, and St. Matthew's, we were doing this. For instance, Pastor Rachel found out that one of our students was not going to participate at sports at McKnight Middle School because he didn't have the money to do that. So not only did she find a scholarship for one student, she found a scholarship for 10 students. We have continued offering food boxes to our after-school program students all summer long. We have continuing to make, because bodies matter, these children matter, their lives matter, their families matter. And so in a week as a congregation, we have some opportunities. On September 7th, we are going to do a God's Work Our Hands. We have not done one of these for like a decade. And we stopped doing them because St. Matthew's, we serve. That is one of the pulses of what we do. When we stopped doing God's Work Our Hands, it's because we were 6 months out of the year, we had folks experiencing homelessness living in our building. And we had the after-school program, and we were doing the summer lunches. And then COVID came, and then we started doing a free grocery store for 4.5 years, feeding our neighborhood. We have been doing God's work all the time. And in staff, a couple of weeks ago, we were getting ready to do a big end-of-school bash. And Libby, I'm so thankful for Libby's heart. She said, it feels weird to throw a party for ourselves. That we would just throw a party for ourselves and be excited that we're a church and we can be together. And so we shifted. And we decided to do a God's Work Our Hands. So we are going to have time to eat together, and then our goal is, so invite your friends, sign up. 75 plus of us are going to work for 2 hours together. We have designed shirts with our welcome statement, you will wear our welcome statement. And then we are going to go out in the community and serve alongside with children and adults. You're 5 years old, you're 105, to live this and embody this love that is radical and revolutionary. So it might seem small, it's a couple of hours. But what happens when you wear that t-shirt the next week at the grocery outlet? And someone says, that is a cool shirt. And you're like, thanks, I got it from my church. Yep, we serve. Hey, you want to ever come? We serve on this day. You want to help with feeding people feast? Great, we got this over here. We got the after-school program. Love is contagious. Revolution is contagious when we know that it is people working together, building lives so that everyone can flourish, not one, not a few, but all. And that's what our call is. And so we're going to practice. And we're throwing a party, not just for ourselves, but it's a party that will grow and grow and grow. And then we all can stand, however we're called to stand, in God's grace. Amen.